Today I'm going to teach you everything you'll need to know about the island map of ARK Survival Ascended to master its environment and go from a mere beach bob all the way to Ascension. First, I'll go over the biomes of the map, distinguishing the various environments you'll face across the Ark as you explore and progress, as well as the creatures you'll find in them. Then we'll move on to the fun stuff, like the gameplay loop and the resources you'll need to gather across the map. From there, we'll talk about the mysterious artifacts spread across the many caves of the island, where you'll find each one and what they're for. And speaking of what they're for, we'll then go over the explorer notes and the multiple bosses or guardians, how to fight them, and how to win. Grab your sticks, your stones, and most importantly, your trilobites, and let's get right into it. The island is broken down into roughly 10 biomes, or at least 10 distinct zones where each creature spawns more commonly in than others. The most obvious one is seen when you first wake up, the beach biome. This sandy region is home to friendly and at times annoying creatures, and it usually doesn't have super dangerous stuff roaming around unless you're up north. Some of the most common creatures you'll find include dodos, carbonomes, and Dilophosaurus. The beach is not particularly distinguished in one particular resource or another, except for the presence of pearls because of trilobites. Occasionally you can even get black pearls from these majestic creatures, but if I see you touching my happy little friends, they'll be the last thing you see. In the game, of course. Directly adjacent to the beach biome is the ocean, which comparatively is at the complete opposite end in terms of difficulty. This place is dangerous even if you have endgame stuff, so it should be rather obvious not to go there if you've just woken up. Helena in the animated series illustrates this danger perfectly. But aside from the danger of just about everything you'll find here, such as megalodons, Cnidaria, and Tusoteuthis, what makes it worth it? Well, in ASE, it used to be that there were these really amazing loot drops in the deep, but ASA made them complete garbage, so now it's really just the resources. You'll find rich caves containing silica pearls and creatures which can be killed for vast quantities of black pearls. Aside from that, the ocean has a decent amount of flat land which you can build some pretty cool stuff on. Otherwise, it's mostly just a biome that you're going to be exploring in the mid to late game. But before you get to that point, you'll still be in the early game, which is where you're most definitely going to be crossing a few rivers, which are home to a few creatures of their own. Most notorious for its presence of baryonyx, castoroides, and megapiranha, the river biome can be a real pain. But if you're quick enough, it can also be a really convenient place to get resources like cementing paste, rare flowers, and rare mushrooms from castoroide dams. You're also going to want to be fast even if you're not stealing from dams, because megapiranha and saber-toothed salmon, if you piss them off, can deal a lot of damage in a short time to unsuspecting survivors and their tames. But an even easier place to lose everything you hold dear is the swamp biome, which not only often borders the rivers, but crosses over within them. The swamp is hell, a kind of green hell. It doesn't take long to realize just how scary this place is, and even as an ARK veteran, the swamp is a place that nobody really ever masters, unless they've reached the endgame and choose to only wade through the biome atop a gigantic carnivore. If you're trekking through here, be aware of creatures hiding under the surface of the water, such as sarcos, titanoboas, leeches, and of course the capros, that will jump without a moment's notice. If you get a leech on you, step on a lit campfire to get it off, and hold E on your creature if it's got one. The most valuable thing in the swamp, however, is also its most fearsome predator, the Rhyniagnatha. You'll usually find these gargantuan bugs bullying some poor creature who's wandered in, locking it in place with their resin. If you manage to tame one of these, it'll probably become your main mount. It has a plethora of abilities. Upon venturing inland after gearing up a little bit on the beach, you might find yourself in the grasslands. This is more of a medium difficulty area and a good place to go for a variety of different creatures if you don't want to go and brave the north. There isn't much in the way of metal here, but if you're looking to move up to some medium-sized tames or even something like a Rex or a Spino, look around here in the grasslands. They're also generally more flat, so they're perfect for large, sprawling bases with lots of room for tames and structures. As you reach the edge of the grasslands, you're probably going to find the island's vast, dense jungle, where the only thing more dangerous than the creatures lurking inside is the FPS drop you'll get from the thousands of trees. Beyond an endless amount of wood to harvest with your tool of choice, there isn't actually much of note in here except for the creatures walking about. You'll find everything from raptors to Rexes in here, and they'll likely sneak up right behind you. The jungle covers most of the island's landmass, and has a lot of creature spawns you might be looking for. So if you need something like a good level Gigantoraptor, try running through here with a large creature, and knock down some of the trees to see more clearly. And here we have the redwoods, one of the most notorious and unique biomes you'll find on the island. It's not uncommon to fly through here and get violently torn off the saddle of your flyer by a Thyla, and for that reason you should always watch the trees and stay away from these guys when you see them. The redwoods are also home to microraptors, nasty little buggers that will knock you off your mount at the worst times. If you see one spinning around your head, dismount quickly before it stuns you. There's also this metal mountain in the middle of the biome with lots of RGs you can tame to carry it all down with, so this area can be a great option for a base spot if you're willing to have a dangerous backyard. Speaking of base spots, this is the only biome you can really use the tree platform in. You can build an entire house on one of these, but most people just use them as landing pads to collect tree sap. Lastly, we can't talk about the redwoods without mentioning the swamp cave found on the southern end. We'll talk about it a little bit more later when we get to the artifacts, but this is the premier location for farming berries, fiber, chitin, cementing paste, and XP. Just make sure you bring a nice gas mask or scuba suit or you will die. Outside the cave is a pond. This pond is nice, it has otters in it. But speaking of caves again for a second, while there are many across the island, there is one thing constant among them, at least the ones on land. They're generally perilous. We'll go into the caves more in depth later on, like I said, to discuss the artifacts, but as an overview of this biome, if you want to call it one, the caves are often home to Araneomorphus, Pulmonoscorpius, and if you're unfortunate enough, Megalosaurus. They're dark, sometimes rather cold, and on the bright side, places where you can find some really decent loot in supply crates. But speaking of supply crates, one biome you may find a surplus of rather high level ones is the mountain biome. This environment here can vary pretty differently from peak to peak, but the one commonality you'll find on each of them is that they're loaded with metal. Everyone needs metal, and if you're smart, you're going to build near one. Because of the drastic elevation, you can usually lead anything you run into, most likely an aloe or a saber, off the cliff below so you can safely farm the metal. Sometimes though, you might find a giga or a car on top, the island's strongest predators. If you want the best mountain for resources, you can't do better than the volcano or the frozen tooth. This one that, despite its name, is very not frozen. It's got a ton of metal though, and obsidian, plus an ungodly amount of crystal. I mean, seriously, you could cap a dedicated storage with these clusters. The volcano also has, of course, the door to the tech cave, the island's final challenge, which we'll get into later in the video. The last biome we'll go over is the snow biome, the region that covers the majority of the northern section of the map. There is lots here, and you could really spend most of your time in the game just with stuff you can get from the snow biome. It's also one of the most treacherous places because if the cold doesn't kill you, there are thousands of different ways to get killed by this place's creatures. It's got two mountains, which are a bit on the weaker side for metal, but still decent nonetheless. Two caves, which has some of the best loot in the game. The ice cave specifically is also the most dangerous, aside from the tech cave, and you can tame all sorts of things in the snow. A Daeodon will help you heal your creatures, a mammoth can help you mow down a whole forest, or if you tame a fluffy Uteranus, you can use it to lead and charge your dinos into boss battles with, though the Uties mostly just get killed by the creatures they fail to hunt. The main reason you're probably going to want to visit snow are the ice flows tucked all the way in the northwest corner. This area is pretty safe if you stay off the mainland, and covering every iceberg are innocent, adorable Kairuku for you to bludgeon to death with a club to craft your favorite assault rifle blueprint. Seriously, if you're lazy and you don't want to farm for crafted polymer, you're going to be making lots of trips up here for the organic polymer. And speaking of trips for resources, let's talk a little bit about where some of the best spots for main resources can be found. Starting off with metal, you're going to find the best spots being here the Redwoods Mountain, the Volcano, Frozen Tooth, and Far's Peak. The snow does have metal too, but it can be pretty hard to see because of the snow covering basically everything. Then if you're down south, there are a couple metal mountains seen here, but they aren't as rich as the northern spots. For crystal, you're going to find mostly the same thing, with probably the best spot being the volcano. There is more than you could possibly need here. Obsidian is also found in most of these mountain regions, but if you need some down south, a rather easy place to get it is in the lower south cave. When it comes to oil, you're mostly going to find the stuff in the ocean, but of course, if you aren't ready for that yet, you're going to need to brave the snow, at least withstanding the temperature, since you'll find huge quantities of oil rocks dotted around the icebergs in the northwest. Once you can handle the general snowy mountains, you'll also find a decent amount just spread around the region in general. Last of these kind of general common resources includes silica pearls, which, like oil, are also dotted heavily around the ocean, but you can find pretty high amounts of them on the north and northwestern shores in the shallows of the snowy areas. This covers the most popular resources, but for the rarer stuff, you can always refer to the official ARK wiki, which I'll leave in the description. On the topic of popular things, you may be wondering where some of the most commonly sought after tames can be found, so let's go through some of them. Didicaris and Ankylosaurus are found mostly around the mountain/northern regions, as well as Herbivore Island. Argentavis can also be found around mountains, but exclusively so. The towering Carcharodontosaurus are found exclusively on mountains too, much like Gigas, which I've literally seen spawn inside the volcano itself, promptly dying not long after. Rexes have similar spawn regions, except they tend to be found much closer to the redwoods and around the north in general, and not being restrained to, just the mountains. Spinosaurus can be found in and along rivers, but they are super rare if a wild dino wipe hasn't occurred recently on a given server due to fish spawns taking up the same slots that Spinosaurus use. If you want to make them spawn and can't dino wipe, massacre the rivers of all their fish. There are over 100 different creatures on the island alone, so I can't really go over all of them in this video, but Hopefully that gave you an idea of some of the most commonly sought after tames. Now on the other hand, if you're seeking out stuff that's a little rarer, like the artifacts, what I'm about to tell you may come in handy. The ARK maps have differing numbers of artifacts spread throughout them, almost always found in caves. Said artifacts are used as some of the tribute items needed to summon the first 3 guardians, which are the island's bosses. These include the Broodmother Lysrix, the Megapithecus, and the Dragon. Once all 3 bosses have been killed, their trophies, which are like artifacts of their own, can be used to open the tech door, and survivors can attempt the final boss, the Overseer. But rewinding a little bit, let's go over the artifacts themselves, since they're kind of like the first step, and for the Gambit difficulty of the bosses, which is the easiest, the artifacts are the only tributes that you need. Of the 10 artifacts, let's start on the easier side. The artifact the Hunter can be found in the lower south cave. Spiders and scorpions are going to be the main threat here, but people call it the easiest cave for a reason. What's not exactly easy though is the upper south cave, which is just north of the previous one. It houses the artifact of the pack, and right off the bat you'll notice that in addition to much more dangerous creatures, this cave is freezing. You're going to need some warm clothes or soups that can help with cold temperature regulation. Another cave which you're going to need some warm clothes for is the northwest cave, which contains the artifact of the Skylord. This one is on the smaller end and requires that you crouch through some tight crevices to ultimately reach the artifact. Watch out for the bats too, because they're dotted around the cave, but not as much as in the Carno Island cave, holding the artifact of the Devourer. If you alert the bats in this cave, you may as well have alerted the Horde, because they will come and they will tear you apart. Being that the cave is rather vertical, the artifact itself is at the very bottom of the cave after you've journeyed all the way down. While it is a dangerous cave, at least you don't have to worry about the lava, which is what you will find in the lava cave to the southeast, containing the artifact of the Massive. Make sure to bring lots of water and enough offensive and defensive capabilities to fight if need be. While I forgot to mention it, I usually sneak around the lava cave with ghillie armor and bug repellent, since it's generally easier to reach the artifact with the sheer presence of creatures. You can use the same sneaky tactic in most of the caves on the island, including the central cave, which is where you'll find the artifact of the Clever. This cave isn't anything too special, it just has your usual bats, arthros, spiders, and scorpions, and a few other rather dangerous creatures lurking in the waters, though these waters pale in comparison to the waters of the oceanic artifact caves. Just 2, one on each side of the island. What is considered to be the easy water cave is on the western side and holds the artifact of the Brute. The hard water cave, on the other hand, is on the eastern coast and is, as you can imagine, harder. Its difficulty comes from the sheer number of creatures and density of alphas, making it a formidable challenge. Make sure that for either of the water caves you bring in some beefy tames like Basilosaurus, Tusoteuthis, or Mosasaurus. While the swamp cave is nowhere near as difficult as the water caves, it is a great spot for resources, namely chitin and cementing paste, and it's where you're going to find the artifact of the Immune. It also requires that you have a gas mask or some combination of scuba and ghillie due to the poisonous gas, so just keep that in mind before entering, ideally on a tanky mount like a Megatherium or a Beelzebufo, since they're tailored to killing bugs. The last artifact cave on the island is the Ice Cave, which has the artifact of the Strong. This is one of the most challenging caves in the game due to just how long it is. The insane creatures inside of it, some of which being Perlovia, stun you off your mount if they jump out of their burrows at the right angle. Needless to say, the Ice Cave is insanely challenging and requires some ingenuity to reach the end. Before talking about the last cave of the game, though, we need to go over the requirement to get in, that being having killed the 3 guardians. However, before we get into that stuff even, let's briefly talk about the lore and the way that it's disseminated. Across all of ARK's maps, the story is generally told in the form of Explorer notes, which utilize epistolary to tell the game's story with letters and notes left behind by past survivors. The island's characters include Helena Walker, Sir Edmund Rockwell, Gaius Marcellus Nerva, and Li Mei-Yin, which I've made copious amounts of videos on, culminating in a complete survival stories video if you're interested in understanding their stories better. There are also some side notes such as the dossiers and the One Who Waits, which help contextualize the game world. Needless to say, this story is what some of us, including myself, love the most about ARK, and to me it makes the game a lot more unique than a lot of survival games like it. But enough about the game's story. Let's continue on with yours by talking about how you can defeat the Guardians of the Island. Starting with the Megapithecus, this one is easily the least difficult to kill. It's the squishiest of all the bosses and can be brought down with an army of good Rexes or Theres. Ideally, you want to fight it in one of 2 places, either by leading your army directly into its main arena where they can't be pushed back off of any cliffs, ensuring that the monkey is distracted by a creature first led as far into the arena as possible to give the others time to make it in. The other place you can fight it at is at the very start. Just make sure you lead it over with 1 creature so again you can have your whole army fighting it at once in a safe spot. The reason you want to be careful is because you and your dinos can fall off the cliff cliff found here, so just watch your step. Luckily, you don't have to worry about falling off cliffs in the Dragon Arena. This behemoth of a boss has a bit of a different strategy, since it can fly, and you really need to wait for it to land before your tames can fight it. The strat is to generally wait till it picks a spot that it's going to touch down, while dodging its fireballs, which are very dangerous, mind you, and hit your survivor even while they're riding a tame. Then, once it lands, make sure you let it come over to you, near where the initial teleport platform is, since that area is free from too many obstacles. And for creatures, you're generally going to want to use the Therizinosaurus, since they are herbivores, meaning that they don't take as much fire damage as carnivores like Rexes. And that fire damage is going to be a big problem later on in the fight, as it is percentage-based damage. Bring lots of Theries, veggie cakes for them for healing, and good armor, and avoid those fireballs or you're toast. Also, be careful of the Dimorphs that will similarly damage your survivor even when you're on your mount. While the dragon is a challenging boss, the Broodmother Listrix has as much health and generally is going to hit harder because it doesn't ever fly. It darts right for you and your tames. Taking her down is usually done by an army of Megatherium, Rexes, Theries, or some mix. Megatherium are especially heavy hitters for the Brood because they get an incredible damage and resistance buff after they've killed insects, and it just so happens that the Brood shoots little spiders out of her butt, so you'll be able to get that buff rather quickly. Killing any of these bosses on any difficulty will grant you the associated tech grams, which are unique engrams for tech tier items like structures, saddles, and armor. These have to be crafted in a tech replicator and generally run off of element. You're going to end up needing tech for what comes next, the tech cave, and the final boss at the end of it, the Overseer. Once you've collected the trophies from the 3 guardians, you'll want to ready your army or go in with sussy tactics like the Archaeopteryx, if that still works. I haven't even tested an ASA. Myself and my own tribe recently went in with an army of Theries, so feel free to do that if you wish. You'll spend some time fighting through the tech cave, slashing through a horde of creatures until you ultimately reach this cold area. Switch off any armor that was meant to alleviate the sweltering heat to clothes that could actually help protect against frigid cold, because you're going to need those from here on out. Once you reach the pedestal, activate it, and you'll be teleported to the Hall of History, containing some lore and some mysterious discoveries. After you get to your end of this tour of old haunts, you'll make it to your final destination, the Overseer Arena. This is where you're going to fight a sentient implant, sort of. It transforms into variants of the 3 bosses you already fought before as you try and take it down, and eventually, once you do, you'll finally get the cutscene that you've been waiting for. Ultimately, you ascend, which includes a permanent increase to your survivor's max level, a visual change to their implant, and you unlock the Tech Binoculars techgram. Whether you beat the island on Gamma, Beta, or Alpha, it is quite the accomplishment, and so if you've done it at all, pat yourself on the back. The island is only the first map of many, so while this is a guide that may seem complete, it is the start to a series that is far from done. We've got many maps to go, which will only be coming out over the next few months and years that ARK Survival Ascended either succeeds or fails. Its creators decide its fate, as do all of you. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel for more, and as always, I'll talk to you next time. Bye everyone.